Good morning, everybody. I am Mike Cavanaugh with Regiment, and we are here for another clever conversation. Today's guest is David Spitulnik from Spitulnik Advisors, lives up here in Evanston, not too far from me. David, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Good. It was great to reconnect recently over a coffee. I met you, gosh, over a decade ago. And the only regret I have is not having more coffees with you. So it's great to have you on this morning on Clever Conversations. Maybe you could give everybody a little background on your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, thank you, and I will also say I apologize also for not having more coffees over the years. My journey has been it wasn't always entrepreneurial, but it was when I came out here to go to graduate school, went to Kellogg, worked for Booz Allen for a year, then Centel Corporation, doing merger and acquisition work and a variety of things for Centel. Then Centel went through some changes and I moved over to Motorola. I was with Motorola for about 17 years. And in Motorola, it was really when I started getting a taste for doing a lot of international work. When I started with Motorola, I think I'd been out of the country 3 or 4 times. After 16 and a half or 17 years with Motorola, I think I was at about 75 countries that I'd been in. And I did a lot of work. The first job that I was in at Motorola was doing was setting up joint ventures with international partners, first for some manufacturing work and then for operating cellular systems, setting up and operating cellular systems. And these were all over the world and were being recorded. So I won't talk about the deal that I did in St. Petersburg, Russia, and sitting across the table from the then Deputy Mayor Putin was one of the more incredible experiences I ever had. He was quite a guy then, and he still is quite a guy. But I had an opportunity to deal with people like that throughout the time. And then in 2004, Motorola was going through some changes. 2003, Motorola was going through some changes. And at the end of 2004, I left. And that's really where a lot of the entrepreneurial part of the journey started. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that what I really wanted to do was help companies grow. And I started off with helping companies grow and doing planning work with companies. And then that expanded into doing planning work with individuals. And so for most of the last now almost 20 years, I've been in and out of some companies, had some fascinating experiences, some things that I hope to help companies avoid. But I've been able to work with companies again and with individuals to help them figure out where they want to go and how to get there.
Yeah,
So.
I almost feel like we should say stop the recording and let's go back and hear more about this Putin story. But we'll keep the conversation going. That'll be another day over a coffee here in Evanston. So working with companies, helping them grow. What are some of the top challenges, or what's the top challenge you think that a founder growing a company faces that you've experienced?
One of the biggest things I think is that a lot of founders are so focused on the here and now that they don't really think about what's coming next. Where do they want to get to? They know they want to grow the business, but they're so focused on, how do we operate the business, that they don't really take the time to look up occasionally and to think about, what's at the horizon or even what's beyond the horizon. So helping them plan for and think about growth, think about whether it's, and sometimes it's not even growth. Sometimes it's just, how do I maintain my business when they're in a really competitive business? What are the kinds of things I've got to do in order to be competitive? But working with companies and working with founders to help them plan, and very often, especially with founders, it's planning for the company, but it's also planning for themselves, because they have to think about where they're going and what they want to do and those kinds of things. And when you get into, you think about a first generation founder, and then you get into companies where you have a second generation and sometimes a third generation active in the business. There's a whole series of issues that companies and that founders and that, leaders of companies don't often think about. So it's planning for what comes next, both for the company, as well as for the family, as well as for the ownership, as well as for the employees.
Yeah. Um, it is difficult. They always say, a founder working in the business needs to be thinking about working on the business. And where the puck is going is the most important part of that when you're the founder of the company.
Right.
Um,
So, and it's and you know, that analogy is great where the puck is going, but it's thinking about, the best players are the ones who can anticipate where the puck is going, as opposed to are just going to try to catch up to the puck when it's going. So it's that kind of an exercise.
yeah. And, you mentioned the experience you had international when you were at Motorola. How much of that experience like parlays over when you're sitting down and advising a founder
Well,
in their, closely held business?
there's two. I mean, it's the international part is about understanding culture, and so the you don't people very often, and a lot of people think that, well, I have a culture that works, so I should be able to just pick this culture up and use it wherever I go, instead of understanding what's going on in the local environment and what's going on with the people who are sitting across the business across the table from you. And so it's understanding that the nature of culture is one thing. The other part of Motorola that was really helpful, again, I spent time doing deals, I spent time in strategic planning. And when I left Motorola, I thought, they were an incredible company. They were an incredible planning organization. And taking that planning process, I thought, gee, every company should be able to use this. And then it didn't take me long to realize that the Motorola, as a multi-billion-dollar company, you go in and you start talking about these things with smaller businesses, and they look at you like you're from another planet, which in fact you are. So it really took me a little bit of time to then realize, well, I need to figure out Motorola's planning and how do I translate that to use it with and for smaller organizations.
Got
So I
it.
think we've talked about, I mean, and if you've got a question, I'll be quiet. Just tell me when to stop talking.
No, keep going. Keep
No,
going.
but the part of it is just using that planning process and boiling it down. And so I realized that the planning process can be boiled down to 4 or 5 questions. Question number 1, how do you define long-term? Question number 2, what do you want to look like when you get there? Question number 3, where are you starting from? And question number 4, now that you've got where you're starting from, where do you want to go by when? Now let's plot out the path to get from where you are to where you want to be. So those 4 questions are critical. Now, the 5th question is, okay, now you've got that down. What's your process? What's your process for evaluation of new opportunities? Because very often, okay, great, I've got the plan down. I'm, heads down, I've got to get it done. And again, one of the things that founders do sometimes is they've got their heads down. They're not looking at the new opportunities that are coming along. And as a result of that, they miss opportunities. But the other part of it is they do say, oh, I see this great opportunity, I'm going to go after it. And instead of stopping and saying, well, okay, there's 2 parts. One is I see this great opportunity. What's their process for evaluation of that opportunity? Number 1. Number 2, to the extent that they decide to go after it, what's the process for evaluating the things that they were already doing and deciding which one they're going to stop doing? Because, we all know, you guys know very well, one of the biggest limited resources is finance, is cash. The other one is people. If you keep on taking on new opportunities, you're going to be drawing the string tighter and tighter to the point where it's going to break. So you have to figure out what you can do now and what you're going to stop doing. So process is key to the whole planning operation and all that kind of stuff. It's planning and then continuing to review the plan, continuing when you're looking at opportunities to review what you're doing and what you're going to stop doing.
Yeah. I mean, you make it sound very simple, which it should be. The simplification process is the key to it. Those 5 steps. How do you work with a business owner to maintain the discipline around those 5 steps? Maybe you can talk to some experiences you've had and where it's gone right or where it's gone wrong?
Well, part of it, I think, is just the notion of they have to be willing, the business owner, have to be willing to say, I'm going to do this. Um, and they have to be willing to not only say it, but do it. Are they walking the talk? Now, part of that is, when you think about a strategic plan, I used to get a kick out of walking into companies and saying, okay, let's see your plan and let's talk about your plan. And I don't know how old everybody on the call is, but there was a time when, you would do a plan and it would be in one of those plastic binders. Well, if you walk in and you look at somebody and say, oh, show me your plan, and they pull it down off the shelf and you'd hear the plastic ripping because it hadn't been taken off the shelf in a long time. I don't know if you guys remember that. So part of it is, how often are you reviewing your plan? How often are you are you talking about it? And it's not just you reviewing it, it's what's your process with your team of talking about, this is what we said we're going to do, this is what we've done, and now here's what's going on in the market, here's what's going on around us that we've got to change in order to be able to keep going. Because very often things have changed and you do need to sometimes you need to speed up, sometimes you need to slow down. So it's working with the leadership of the company, and sometimes it's the owner, sometimes it's his team. It's working with them to get them to the point of putting this process in place. The other part about it is that I find fascinating is, when I talked about this process, I started talking with a company one time, and it was a family-owned business. And when I asked and this is pre-COVID, when I asked what long-term was, their answer was the person I was talking to, his answer was 6 months. And I said, long-term, 6 months, what are you talking about? He said, well, we've got some issues in the family that if we don't deal with these, the whole business is going to go over. And it was that point where I realized that, these steps also are relevant for planning for individuals as they are for planning for companies. So as you're looking and you're thinking about where you're going as a company, I said this earlier, you also have to think about where you're going personally. What's your plan? Where are you going? And so having a leader who is willing to say, okay, we're going to have this process for the company, but oh, by the way, I'm also thinking about my long-term. I'm thinking about, I want to be here for another 5 years, 10 years, 5 months, whatever. But what's the plan now that I've said, this is how long I want to be here? What's the plan for getting everybody ready to pick up the ball when I'm not here anymore? So it's a combination of those things of working with the owners.
Yeah. And then you've taken your years of experience, both in the corporate side and working as an advisor with companies, and wrote a book called Becoming an Insightful Leader. Maybe you could give us a little bit of the inspiration and, a little background on the book.
Well, the book kind of flew out of, I'd been thinking for a long time of writing a book. In 2000, I think it was probably 2015 or 2016, I had two clients who both at the same time ran into some issues, and both of them needed to pull back. They still wanted to talk to me occasionally, but going from meeting with them weekly to maybe talking to them for 20 minutes on a monthly basis. So I suddenly had time on my hands. I'd been thinking about writing a book for a while and thinking about talking about the leadership journey for a while. And I said, okay, got some time. I might just as well do this now. And so the book is about, as the title, Becoming an Insightful Leader. It's not about being an insightful leader. It's about becoming an insightful leader. Because for me, being is you're there, you're in place, you're not really moving very much. You may be moving on a daily basis, the wheel is going around and around, but you're not really going anyplace. As opposed to becoming, again, this is the notion of looking at new opportunities as they come up, and where are we going and how are we going to make use of these opportunities. And so the book goes through my personal journey, talks about my personal journey as a leader. And hopefully, and I talked to a number of different people as I was writing the book, a number of different leaders I know. And Mike, I apologize, I didn't think to reach out to you, but for the next book, we'll get you in there.
No worries.
I'm just started working on the next one. But this notion of talking about the leadership journey and talking with others about their leadership journeys was something that I had always wanted to do. And so it starts off with some experiences I had as I was growing up. Then, well, I'm still growing up, so let's be clear on that. Um, some experiences growing up in high school, what it meant to be the first time I was asked to be the captain of a sports team, then leading different groups, leading different organizations. And then in each one of the chapters, it talks about there are questions at the end to help people think. I tell people, look, I mean, the book isn't that long. If it takes you more than a couple of hours to read, then you probably have fallen asleep once or twice as you're reading it. But at the end of each chapter, there are some questions about the kinds of things that happen in the chapter. There's some things as you're going on your journey to some decision matrix questions to help you think about, what are the things you're facing. And I will tell you, one of the most wonderful comments I got from somebody who had the book was that they had read the book. They came to me and said, we read the book, and a couple of months later, something came up, and we remembered that there was a chapter in the book about this type of issue. So we went in and we read the decision matrix questions, and they really helped us to think through what we were facing. So that's the kind of thing that's in the book.
Very cool. I'm going to let the people that are attending live here to give them a chance to type in some questions in the chat. One other thing we talked over coffee the other day is, and this might be a form of leadership of like giving back or servant leadership. You're on the board of a group here, local group called the Youth Job Center. How does that, what's your role there? What are you doing with the Youth Job Center?
Well, the Youth Job Center is an organization. Actually, we're celebrating our 40th year this year. It's an organization that works with young people ages 14 to 25 to help them figure out, get them ready for their career and get them ready for their life. And I realize that's a very, very broad statement, but it is working with them. Some of these kids, and it started in Evanston, but it now is actually present throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. And helping these kids find jobs, helping these kids who many of them either don't want to go to college or don't have the means to go to college. So helping them figure out what a job is. And so we've done training. We've got programs going. I think there's an automotive one now. There's a healthcare one. There's a number of retail programs that we've had through the years. And so it's working with them to help them understand what it means to work and what it means to be committed to having a job. In a lot of these places, unlike in an office environment, unlike in the environment that we work in, where unless you've got a meeting, if you show up at 8:15 as opposed to 8 o'clock, it's not that big a deal. Well, if you're working for Starbucks or if you're working for Gap and the store is supposed to open at 9, but you don't show up till 9:15, that's a big issue. And for a lot of these kids, they haven't really thought about those kinds of things before. These young people, young adults, I call them kids, but relative to me, they're kids, but they're still young adults. I think one of the things that, one of the other things that it was a few years ago, and I don't know if this was a statewide thing or just in the Chicago metro area. It used to be that when people were getting ready to graduate from high school, they needed to have written down a plan for what they were doing. And the plan was supposed to include what kind of further education they were getting. I think it was when Rahm Emanuel was mayor, he said, okay, it doesn't have to be about high school. It's got to be about what's your plan? What are you going to do next? And so working with these kids to help them articulate that and then helping them find where they can get the opportunities to do those kinds of things. It's a very, it's wonderful stuff. And it's for me, a lot of, I've been very fortunate through the years. I talk a lot about giving back. I talk a lot about paying it forward. I've had incredible opportunities. A lot of those I had to find. I was fortunate that my parents were able to, there was no question that we were going to college. My brothers and sister and I were going to college, but we were the ones, we had to make it happen. And so we all did. And that was great, but not everybody has those kinds of opportunities. And so it's fun being able to work with those. My role there has varied through the years. I was head of the finance organization for a while. Now I'm head of the group that's responsible for developing our board, for building the board. And one of the other things that I try to do is help find organizations that can, that would work well with YJC, the Youth Job Center. So those are the kinds of things that I do there.
Amazing. Well, it's been great having you on. David, where can somebody get in touch with you or learn more about the book?
Well, again, you got my number on this, or I'm sorry, my name is on the screen, David Spitulnik. If you look on LinkedIn, I'm there on LinkedIn. You can reach out and connect with me there. My email address is dspitulnik@Spitulnik Advisors. So you just need to make sure you spell Spitulnik right.
And it's spelled out right there. Yep.
There you go. So, but dspitulnik, and again, there's a website for Spitulnik Advisors, spitulnikadvisors.com as well. You can go through there and reach out to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. Great way to start the day. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, thank you very much.